Today's topic we are going to discuss is about the independent India. In the independent Indian context, so India got independent in 1947. So the first initial period of 30 years we are going to take in this lesson. In these 30 years, how did Indians survive? What are the challenges that Indian government has faced? How was the democracy to reach its success? There were some times when they thought that the democracy is going to be a failure in India. The time of democracy to turn out has come up. So let us see all these details in this lesson, but before going to that, let us discuss what did Mr. Ambedkar mention on the final day of the Constituent Assembly. See here, on 26th Jan of 1950, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar expressed his view that equality, we are going to come into the view of contradictions, the stage of new journey. In this new journey, we are going to discuss about the equality in social and the economic life. The equality in the social and economic life means that providing equal opportunities for everybody in the society to lead a happy and prosperous life, at the same time to provide them the opportunities to get the pure economic life, which means the purpose of business or for them to earn their livelihood in a clear cut manner. There is no discrimination based on any other criteria. At the same time, we have one more great principle, that is one man, one value. He may be a rich person or a poor person, but he should get the same value and same treatment. That is why in the constitution it is mentioned that one person has the voting right of only one value. So one person, one value, one vote makes a real sense. But keeping in view of the present scenario or the real context of the Indian nation, Mr. B.R. Ambedkar also rightly pointed out that if the equality in social and economic life are not at all accepted, and only for the name's sake, if the constitution survives, then it troubles in the political democracy. Then it leads to us for a democratic nation where in reality where there is no equal value for every person, and if every person is not same at the context of same value, then the political democracy or the entire democracy will be in peril. It may be just killed away. So in order to maintain the perfect democracy, we have to follow this. And if we run in the contradictions of the principles, then automatically the democracy will see its end. So Ambedkar wished all the best for the nation, wishing that we should not run in controversies or the contradictions and lead a happy, and democracy should survive for lifelong. This is the main purpose of Mr. B.R. Ambedkar mentioning his views on 26th Jan of 1950. What happened next? What are the major challenges? We'll discuss. Now, in the initial periods, the constitution was framed. Now, as soon as the constitution was framed and we got the constitution into effect, we got the elections and we got the government, or literal meaning is the leaders. Now, the basic task of the leaders is that they have to bring the development of the nation, they have to maintain the unity of the nation, they have to maintain the integrity of the nation. In order to maintain or develop the nation and to bring them united and integrated, we also have to remember that that should not come at the cost of the democracy. The democratic setup should also sustain properly. We have to develop the nation, at the same time simultaneously you have to maintain the diversified nation into a united context, and then we have to maintain the democratic setup in a successful manner. This was really a challenging task in front of the first initial leaders who got their chance to rule the nation or to guide the nation of the first democratic setup. After a 200 period of British colonial domination, and we drafted the constitution which is of elaborately discussed of each and every right and everything, powers and everything. Then we came to an idea that we should have a systematic elections, universal adult franchise. Then we moved on to frame the nation's goals, the intention, and everything should be correlated at the same time. People should be treated equally. These all were the different challenging tasks in front of the first government which came into power in 1952. What happened in the first elections? What was the percentage of the voting? How did the people come to get voting rights there? Did the people have any idea about it? If the people don't have idea, how did the government have brought them into the idea? What are the changes that government has brought? How did people get the knowledge of the election voting system? Because prior to this, there was no universal adult franchise, existing in our nation. Only just 1% to 10% of the people are known of utilizing how to right of the vote. So let us see what happened. We will discuss. Now we shall discuss and focus on the first general elections. What is the basic importance of first general elections? A country where with India was dominated for nearly 200 years and we don't have any basic rights at any point of time, even we are not at all treated as human beings. So we have to understand the point here that for the first time we are going to face the multitasking challenge for the government or for the independent nation of India. What is the challenge here? Is it really very tough, or what made it a challenge here? See here, by the name itself, it is clear the first general elections. The first general elections, it means that till now we don't have any general elections mentioned for us. In the first general elections, one more interesting fact or the one more fueling concept for that is that the government of India has introduced the universal adult franchise. The same universal adult franchise was introduced in Switzerland in 1971, which is far later than India. Switzerland is a well-developed country than India even today also, but even they have introduced the universal adult franchise issue in 1971, which is nearly 30 years after Indians have given that. Now, what is this universal adult franchise? According to Article 326, the Indian Constitution ensures the power of every individual whoever attains the age of 18 years, irrespective of their age, category, caste, creed or color, will get the right to vote. He may be an educated person, an uneducated person, a literate person, an illiterate person, he may be a Hindu, he may be a Muslim, he may be a non-religious person, but irrespective of all these things, any Indian who has an age of 18 years of age at present will get the right to vote according to this article of 326. This issuing of the right to vote to every individual irrespective of their caste, color, creed, race and other place, regions or other discriminations, even for boys and girls, is known as universal adult franchise. This universal adult franchise was adopted in India from the very first general elections onwards. Now, the challenging task for the Indians or for the issue is now that many of the women, they don't know or they are not known by their own names. They are known either by their father name or by their husband's names. Now, the task is that we don't know how many people are staying in a family exactly. We have to get the census of everything. Then we have to frame the list of the candidates. Then we have to do all these things. So, the government of India has done for us, the election commission was set up. What did you get? The setting up of election commission. The election commission has got the duty and the responsibilities entitled to it, that it makes sure the list of the voters, then it makes sure the party candidates, and then everybody has nominated there, or a systematic procedure for conducting the elections. In this systematic procedure of conducting elections, again we got a new task for us to be performed. The main difficult task is now on the process. The main difficult task is that as Indians have given the universal adult franchise to each and every person in the nation of their age criteria, now what about the women whose names are not enrolled in it? Then what about the people, those are illiterates, those who don't know to read and write? How are they going to put their votes? Really, it's a challenging task, because we can't say by name itself. Those who can't read and write, how are they going to recognize the person? So they can recognize by seeing it. So the election commission came up with a novel idea that they are going to put pictures in front of the candidates and symbols. They brought pictures of the photos, the photographs, and the party symbols will be kept, so that even the uneducated people can come forward with a view like what is the name of the candidate, or what is the picture of the candidate, and what would be the symbol of the candidate. And they also made this process, and in some completely down areas or where the villages are completely in the uneducated stream, they have come up with a new ideology that where they have kept the symbols allotted for the ballots. For example, for Congress, they kept the picture of hand and a separate ballot was kept. For BJP, they kept the symbol of the lotus and a separate ballot was kept. For TDP, the cycle picture, a separate ballot was kept. So that which one you like, you can go and put your vote in that. Instead of choosing somebody else, you can simply put your vote in that particular ballot, which means that your vote goes to that particular candidate. In this way, the novel ideas were invented by the Election Commission to deal with the task of the first general elections. So finally, the first general elections were completed. So what happened of the results? Which party won the seats and in what majority they have won? Who became the Prime Minister of India for the first time? We shall discuss all these things. Now, what happened in the first general elections? We shall discuss this one with the heading of one party. Dominance. See, the first elections were conducted in the year 1952, the respective in the 1957, the other one in the 1962. In the first three general elections, the single party has got the majority of votes. The single party which got the entire majority of votes is the Congress. The Congress party was secured the maximum number of votes of nearly 45% of voting and 70% of the seats. What about the other parties which participated in the elections? Were they able to get the success of the result? See, it's clearly evident that it's one party dominance. So Congress got the majority of the seats and majority of the voting percentage. Automatically the other parties, the others, were getting only 11% of voting and they could not withstand their position even as an opposition party at that point of time. And in these 3 years of like 3 terms of elections, like 52 to 57 and 57 to 62 and 62 to 67, there was no other single party standing against Congress or talking against Congress. That is why it is also known as the Congress system. Now in this Congress system, which has given a chance of no other party to get into elected, Jawaharlal Nehru became the undisputed leader of the Congress and he took sworn in as the Prime Minister of India for the first time of the independent India, and he was in this position till his death in 1964. So he was the leader who ruled for the longest period of time as the Prime Minister of India. Now moving on to the statistics or the realities or the technical issues of what are the possibilities and what are the negatives if a single party is in power. The single party is in power does not allow any other parties to contest. It's not the case here. Here the Congress is allowing all the other parties to contest for the elections. Then what is the other problem that the other parties are not able to get there? The problem is that Congress is so popular because of the independence movement and because of the major popular leaders are present in Congress. The victory of Congress has become very easy, and the other parties, even though they have the famous personalities in their parties, could not make their room so wide that they could not get any of the stagnant or strategic position in the politics. They are also getting some seats, but they could not determine the success of the Congress. So Congress made its clear victory in the first 3 elections, and evident that it is a national party and it got many of the positions here. Now moving on to the technicalities. As per the democratic setup, we should have multi-party system. In the multi-party system, what is the real scenario here? In India, we don't have the multi-party system? Yeah, we have the multi-party system. We have Congress, we have CPI, we have the other independents running for the elections. But the point is, the other parties are not getting the maximum number of seats which are required for them to stand in the opposition position or in a standing position against the Congress. The Congress is getting a clear sweep of 70% of seats. The other 30% of seats are shared by the other parties. This is a basic issue what is happening in these 3 elections. But the situation changed further. But before it's the situation changed, if Congress is getting the maximum number of seats, what was the standing position of the opponents? Who is going to oppose the actions of the Congress? The Congress is not a single party or a single member party. It is a group, a larger group of people are staying in Congress. So the issue based differences are present between all the leaders, and instead of the threat from the opposition, they have threat from the internal politics itself, because even though there is no multi-party system existence at present, but there is a chance of getting existence of multi-party system. But at the same time, in Congress itself, we have the leaders opposing the views of the government. We have the leaders standing against the government. We have the leaders standing opposite to the view of the government and discussing about it. So in this way, there are opposition candidates also present in the Congress itself to discuss about the opposition point of view, so that the benefit will be done to the people. And they used to struggle to get hype over their leadership, but not against the government. And at the same time, we never had any issue with the ideological differences so seriously. And the success of the Congress was, it was run uniformly in all the standards, and the other parties were also able to get groom after the 15 years period. That is, after the 1967 elections were very crucial elections, because for the first time we have seen the other non-Congress parties forming the government. And now, once there is no multi-party system and there is no chance for the opponents, what happened for the Congress? In the Congress itself, we have the leaders questioning the other issues which are not addressed by the Congress government. Then what made the solution for them? The leaders have thought within themselves and tried to solve it by bringing the necessary steps for it. In this way, the Congress, even though it has a single party dominance, it moved on further and brought a major changes, and successfully it ruled up to 15 years of the initial period, and the next term was a challenging term. What happened in the next term, we shall discuss now. Now, moving on to the actual reality here, the multi-party system in India, we have the multi-party system from the initial days onwards. But the fact is that the other parties could not get the maximum number of seats which are required for them. As it is in the other countries like in China, Nigeria, or in African countries or Indonesia, where the other opposition parties were crushed, were stopped, were not allowed to contest. That is the case with the other nations. But in comes to India, the case is different. They are allowed to participate, they are allowed to contest, they are allowed to win. The situation is that they are not winning here. The only party which is getting dominated is the Congress. Now, this is the major feature of the initial period up to 1967. The another major task which came challenging for the first government is that the states division, reorganization of states. How can a state be reorganized? What are the possibilities? How did the demand come up for us? See, earlier when the Britishers were ruling us, the entire nation was divided into provinces, and we have nearly 11 provinces, and the other regions are the princely states. They were not in the union here now. So in these 11 princely states, we have the Bombay presidency, we have the Madras presidency, we have the Kolkata presidency, we have the central province, we have the Berar province. All these provinces together we have. Now the demand has been increased in such a way that the people started to ask them, like, we need to have a separate state for our region people. Now the demand for Karnataka state has increased. The Karnataka region people started to ask that we need all the Kannada speaking people together. Then comes the Tamil Nadu people. They have started asking that all the Tamil speaking people. We have the Andhra, the most famous revolt of forming a separate state or asking for a separate state, that the entire Andhra region should be, especially all the Telugu speaking people should be together. So we can understand the clarity here that people started to ask the reorganization of the states on the basis of language. So now, the first Prime Minister of India, Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru, was in a view that it would not be the right time to divide the states at this point of time. According to him, he is having various issues to be addressed. He has the political issues, he has the economic issues, he has social issues, and he also has the financial issues to be addressed. So according to him, language would not be the right option to determine which region and which place should be belong to, or language should not be the basis to rearrange the states and organization of the states. This is his personal point of view. So he was sticking up on this point for many years, but finally he has to agree for the reorganization of the states. What happened finally? Which states were formed? What made them to form the states? What are the decisions taken? Who supported them? How did the technicalities were taken by the central government? How did the technicalities were proven by the reports? Which committee gave the report? When was the committee appointed? How many days it took for the committee to appoint the report? These are all things we shall discuss now. So the final task of States Reorganization Act was brought. What is the background of this? We have a person named called Mr. Potti Sriramulu, who was a key person in formation of AP state. He did fasting for 58 days. After doing fasting for 58 days, he sacrificed his life for the formation of the state of Andhra Pradesh. Now, as soon as he fasted and he went to his death, they did not create the Andhra Pradesh state. But in August 1953, the States Reorganization Committee was appointed, and the main members of the States Reorganization Committee was Fazal Ali, senior most member, then Panikkar and Kanzru were the key members who went to the ground realities and studied the facts like, is it necessary for us to create a state on the basis of a language? His language should be taken as a criteria and divide the states, because Jawaharlal Nehru was in a view that if India is at present right now in a position of getting consolidated itself, and there should not be any contrast of divisions, or there should not be any particular subdivisions basing especially on languages. He is not against the view of dividing a state on the basis of languages, but he was scared or afraid of the point of view that if we divide the nation in the form of language division, so it may further lead into the weakening of the nation. This is the view expressed by Jawaharlal Nehru. So when the reports came by the second States Reorganization Committee, then they finally submitted its reports stating that language would be a best option to divide the states, because it is binding the people through that particular language. So the nationalism also can survive by giving independent autonomy for the particular states. This is the basic view expressed, and basing on the reports of this, they have created 14 states and 6 union territories. They have considered 14 states and 6 union territories. In that, Andhra and Tamil language speaking people like Telugu and Tamil speaking language people are more the dominant people, and Potti Sriramulu's sacrifice was never went in vague, and it was proved to be the formation of the Andhra Pradesh state very soon after his death in 1956. The two major languages which are not taken into consideration, the tribal language, one is Gondi, the other one is Santali. The Gondi and the Santali were not taken into consideration for the formation of the states. Remaining, the entire thing was taken into consideration and was proven to be the Andhra state region, and they have expressed their views of a separate states on the basis of the languages would be a right option to create. So the union government came up with the steps of 14 states to be recreated. Now from this example we can get a clarity that the popular will or the people's will made the leaders to change their mindset. Initially Jawaharlal Nehru was not willing to divide the states on the basis of languages, but the popular interest of the people made him to come down. The victory was the people's, not the leaders. The people's view was taken as a triumph and declared states. The states were reorganized. 14 new states were created on the basis of the language. This is the first point where the people of India has achieved their success or in the true democratic spirit. Let us see what happened next. Now, the first Prime Minister of India, Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru, had a vision for the nation. So he wanted to bring India a social and economic change. As we have discussed earlier, the states were divided. What Jawaharlal Nehru has get afraid or scared of is that will this division be adding to the nation or will it be a disaster to a nation? But really, in reality, if you see now, The division of the state has consolidated India to emerge into a stronger nation. Now let us moving on to the topic of social and economic changes. According to Jawaharlal Nehru, he set up planning commission. Just a month after the elections were completed, he immediately set up the planning commission in order to get a perfect planning for the nation. His ideology in getting perfect planning is to get perfect economy of the nation. In this economy, he had a very good vision of getting good polity. In the good polity, he means that if a nation is developed very well, then the small issues of caste divisions, creed divisions, the religious divisions, the other divisions will disappear from the development point of view. So Jawaharlal Nehru want to have a good political condition where there will not be any divisions based on these things. So in order to develop this, the planning commission was set up. The planning commission's main responsibility was to plan the funds carefully and to allot to the respective departments and make that the work will be done and ensure that this particular amount has been given to that particular department. And the key focus was in the first 5-year plans. Planning commission initiated the 5-year plans, and the first 5-year plan came into effect from 1951 to 56. The first 5-year plan initial period was to develop the agriculture. How to develop the agriculture? Because in a country like India where 80% of the Indians are on the agricultural backdrop. So if you develop the agriculture, automatically majority of the people will get the development. So in order to get the majority of development or sustainability of their life, Jawaharlal Nehru has focused clearly on the agricultural setup. In order to get better developments in agriculture, he came forward with a 3-pointed view. That is that first one is the land, second one is the zamindari system, third one irrigation facilities. The first point is the land ceilings. The land, excess land, whichever is maintained by anybody, should be abolished and redistributed for the landless poor people. The zamindar system also has to be abolished. It should be redistributed and the tax system should be reduced. At the same time, we should provide the irrigation facilities for all the regions wherever it is necessary and wherever it is required. And we need to build major dams. We need to build major small check dams to provide water for all the people or lands. Now, coming to the land distribution, zamindari system and irrigation. Initially, the Land Ceiling Act was passed and the lands were grabbed. But in true spirit, the lands were not distributed actually to the landless poor people. The lands were occupied or taken over by the government, but for a larger period of time, the entire lands were under the control of the major landlords who are present here and the zamindars who maintained their control by removing the Dalits or the lower caste people for whom the lands were allotted. And in some regions, the irrigation facilities provided not only the drinking water but also the facilities for agriculture in all the regions. So the dams have provided good advantage, but because of the unsatisfied or unfulfilled Land Ceiling Act, the people could not accomplish their goals of establishing a free and fair agricultural setup. In this way, the initial first-year plan was not met to its success, but we have to acknowledge that it has the irrigation facilities which improved in the larger areas. In the second 5-year plans, we have got the concentration on the industrial sector. What happened for the industrial sector? Whether the industrial sector saw its success? What happened in the same with the first 5-year plan? What it was repeated with the second 5-year plan? We shall discuss about that now. Now we shall discuss about the foreign policy of India. What is a foreign policy? Any nation, let it be put name as A nation to have relation with a nation with B, or any nation having relation with the other nations, is called foreign policy. The nation may be positive or negative. Any nation which wants to have relation with the other nation is called foreign policy, or at the same time if any nation which does not want to have relation with the other nation also comes under the foreign policy. It's that like positive as well as negative. A nation, put it like this way, A wants to have relation with B is also a foreign policy, and also a nation which does not want to have relation with B or with another nation also is a form of foreign policy, which means that, like for example, India likes to have relation with Sri Lanka, Nepal, China, Bhutan or some other nations. It comes under positive side. At the same time, India does not want to have clear relations with Pakistan if they are intruding into the Kashmir issue. So in this way, the same standard can be maintained at the same nation at two different views. That is why foreign policy is very important and very crucial. And by the time India became independent, Indians are in a situation that where India has to choose between the two great superpowers. I think you all know the two superpowers. One is USA representing the democratic bloc. The other superpower what we are having is the USSR. Now, these are the two superpowers which have emerged after India, after the World War II, after 1945, the entire world scenario has changed. We got USA and USSR, the two different ideologies representing with the two powerful national armies present for them. Later on, they moved on to turn into two superpower nations. Now, USA is a bloc which is having a support of nearly 30 nations, and they are truly democratic countries or capitalistic countries. Whereas USSR, the Union Soviet of Socialist Republic, is a communist country which is having a backup of nearly 19 nations around it, and so this is another group. So we have a group A headed by USA and group B headed by USSR. Now India is in a situation like which country has emerged recently into an independent nation after 1947 have a choice to join either USA or USSR. It should take either the stand towards capitalistic and democratic setup or towards the communistic. By the time we took the democratic setup, it is clear that we are going to join towards USA. And Jawaharlal Nehru personally had very good intimacy with the USSR leaders, and he appointed his own sister as an ambassador to the USSR. So now what is the conflict that we are going to maintain it? Are we going to get the success towards USA or towards USSR? The clear ideology was made by our leader Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru, and he made it very clear that he is not going to join in any of the blocs. And he started the movement called non-aligned movement, not to align either towards the USA or towards the USSR. He made it very clear that he is going to stand alone in the middle, and he is going to maintain very good relationships with USA and with USSR. But his ideology is that the newly independent nations should have a choice of not joining any of the power blocks, which may in turn result into any kind of war situation in the future. So in order to safeguard himself from any of the further controversies, he made it very clear by three group nations, like the nations which joined in this NAM are India, Yugoslavia and Egypt. From India we have Jawaharlal Nehru, from Egypt we have Gamal Abdel Nasser and Josip Brizo Tito of Yugoslavia. These three main leaders signed the charter in 1954-55, mentioning that the non-aligned movement is going to take part. Initially, he has to get the criticism from both the two superpower blocs and the other nation groups, but later they understood the real interest of the NAM policy, and later they appreciated. Today, India is the leader of the NAM group of 77 countries, which is the largest group owned by the Indian leadership. Now, moving on to the facts of because of the Indian foreign policy, did we go into any kind of wars? Are the wars being successful for us or being failure for us? What were the consequences? When did we get real actual situations of war? What are the conditions which led us to go for war? We'll discuss all these things. Now moving on to the wars. Because of the Indian foreign policy, we have discussed the Indian foreign policy. India did not stand on any of the situations either towards the USA group or towards the USSR group, either towards the communist bloc or towards the capitalistic bloc or the democratic setup. Now, coming to the wars issue, because of the Indian foreign policy, India has immediately to face a war in the year 1948. Actually, India did not prepare for any kind of situation of wars in the year of 1948. India has to face a threat from Pakistan or the issue of Kashmir in 1948. So initially we had a war in 1948. Again we had another war in the year 1962 with China. This was a war which was a very huge war, and the issue turned it into very seriously because we could not prepare any self, we were not developed so much, and we could not attain anything much successfully, and we have heavy loss and heavy casualties were found in the 1962 war. This was another black spot on the Indian context of wars. And again we have another war in 1965. The other war again with Pakistan on the issue of Kashmir. In this way the wars were with 3-4 wars we have. Again in 1971 we have another war again with the Pakistan, and with the formation of Bangladesh we got the breakup of Pakistan and East Pakistan and West Pakistan. In this way we got the different kinds of wars, and because of these wars the development of India was blocked and we could not reach to the success of the development, and lot of money or huge investment of the money was done in the arms, and that was wasted in such a kind where we can't get any rupee back repaid for us. In this way wars were not a true success for any country, but they are a failure, and it's not bringing any solution. Only through negotiations we can get a solution for our requirement of the problem. So wars were done between India and Pakistan, India and China, and on the issue of Kashmir, even today we may get a war. There are serious issues of getting a war only and only on the issue of Kashmir. Who succeeded Jawaharlal Nehru? We'll discuss now. Now, after the death of Jawaharlal Nehru in 1964, there was a serious issue of who is going to succeed Jawaharlal Nehru, and there were many doubts expressed by the other nations at that point of time that is democracy is going to survive or it's going to reach its end, because there is no strong leader in the Congress, and who is going to take over the position of Jawaharlal Nehru. This is the point expressed by the various other leaders, and they also have a question that is democracy going to survive or it's going to meet its end. That time there came the man called Mr. Lal Bahadur Shastri. Mr. Lal Bahadur Shastri had made a clear impression after Jawaharlal Nehru. He took over the chair of the Prime Minister, and the Congress party has put forth a strong and dedicated leader, and he took forward everything. But he also has to face a challenge in the issue of Hindi. As the language of Hindi as declared as the official language of India, and it is going to be the national language of India, immediately in the South India, that is the Tamil Nadu region, we got the party called DMK. This DMK started the anti-Hindi movement. The anti-Hindi movement went into so peak that they started to do the dharnas, the bandhs, the hartals and everything, and they started to block the trains, they started to burn the effigies, they started to break the newspapers, and the situation was that the Doordarshan news in Hindi also was not allowed to read in the Chennai TV stations, and they used to go to the TV stations of Doordarshan and they used to break the TV channels and everything, and they used to destroy and create a panic situation for us. So it made it very clear that because DMK people have the view that Hindi is put forth on all of us faces. Actually, we don't like Hindi at any point of time. So why are you posturing it with the Hindi on all our faces? That is the reason why expressed by the DMK people, and it got support from the other South Indian states, and it became, and DMK is having a links with the political figures like Mr. MGR, who got a very clear picture and made it a very national issue. And personally, Lal Bahadur Shastri did not like any anti-Hindi movements. He wanted Hindi to be perfectly a national language, and a national language should be respected by each and every person in the nation. This is the personal view of Lal Bahadur Shastri. But in reality, the DMK did not come at all to compromise. and they went on doing all the dharnas, burning of the effigies and all these things. So finally, to come into conclusion, Lal Bahadur Shastri came with a view that we are going to give allowing the languages of regional languages for the state governments or English language. They can do the copy in regional language plus the English language, whichever is convenient for them, and pass on the laws. But Hindi will be a national language. It is not binding on anybody for them, but it will be made as a subsidiary languages, and they recognized all the other languages and made it very clear that Hindi is not going to be binding on anybody else. So from this again we can get into clarity that Jawaharlal Nehru had a personal view against the languages, that the division of the states on the basis of languages at this point of time may bring some kind of contradictions or consolidation, may get into problems. That is a view expressed by Jawaharlal Nehru, but later he did not stick on to his personal view. He went on with the popular will, and today it is an advantage that Indians are divided on the basis of languages but bonded as they are Indians. In the same way, Lal Bahadur Shastri also personally had very close intimacy with the Hindi language, and he wanted Hindi language to be the nationally unquestioned language, but he did not stick up on to that, and he moved on with the will of the nation, and he also made the other languages also the official language of the states, and Hindi as a national official language plus English will be the official language. In this way, the personal views of the politicians will never be addressed. Only the popular will, the people's will should be taken into criteria. This was a true key for the success of the Congress in the first initial periods, but the untimely death of Lal Bahadur Shastri made a great loss for us. Actually, he went to attend a meeting in Tashkent, and when he was signing the agreement and he was returning back, he was met his untimely death. So again there was a gap. Who should be taking over the political position of Prime Minister? Will again democracy survive? Because we are getting tasks after tasks for every government. Like we got a task of states reorganization, again immediately we got the task of anti-Hindi agitation. So let us see who will take over the chair, who brought the solution for all these things, what happened for us next. We'll discuss about it. The next major attempt which was made by the Indian government is to secure the food for all the people of Indians. So in order to get the better food abilities for all the people, the concentration on the agriculture was made very clear. But up to 1960s, we could not get any major achievement. Yeah, the production was going up to the mark, but it could not fulfill all the needs of the Indians. So in order to fulfill all the needs, technologically what advancements are required was brought through by the efforts made by MS Swaminathan and all these people who studied recently on the development of the seeds and all these things, and they came up with the view of Green Revolution. The Green Revolution mainly focuses on the hybrid variety of seeds, providing with the hybrid variety of seeds without any disturbances in the seeds, so that you can get the real plant grown with a faster speed, and providing with the good fertilizers and pesticides which are required for the plant to grow thoroughly. And the third and the key point is that irrigation. The irrigation facilities are provided at the keen at the maximum point of time, and the irrigation also to be provided very tactically, like drip irrigation, where the lot of amount of water will not be wasted by simply overflowing, but a pipe which is connected to the water will have a small holes at the point of the plant where a drops will be falling on. It is known as a drip irrigation, and it is flown continuously to get the flow of the water, and the plant gets completely the water into the roots, not simply just the flow away of the water. In this way, the modern technology was brought into the Indian agriculture. Initially it was started with the wheat, later it was started with the rice, later it was moved on to the millets, pulses and all these things, cereals, and we got success in each and every one. By 1970s, the entire cultivation of agriculture in North India was completely done with the Green Revolution concept, and Indians were in a very power of excellence in doing the agriculture. Earlier it was 37 million metric tons of wheat produced, it went on to 140 million tons. Rice, it was around some 50 million tons, it became to 120 million tons. So we got double and triple kind of improvement in agriculture, which was sufficient for the Indian nations to become self-sufficient. In this way, Indians achieved their self-sufficient in respect to food was through the Green Revolution. There were again criticisms against this, but it was really a successful attempt made by the Indian government, and we saw its success in the power in 1970s. Now what happened with the other nations? In 1967, why did the Congress party lose its elections? What happened in the rising of the regional parties? Let us discuss all these things. Now, the landmark elections which were conducted in the year 1967. Why we call it as the landmark elections is that from 1952, 57 and then again in 62, we got the same party dominating the entire politics. It was also known as the Congress system rather than the political system. But now it came to a scenario that where Congress has lost completely in most of the places. Congress have lost 284 seats out of in Bihar, Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, in almost all the central provisional regions. It lost many of the seats and it became down to an opposition leader. But earlier it was a dominating party where there is no opposition at all. But now the situation of the scenario is that in Tamil Nadu we had the new party called DMK coming in with MGR, the political charisma. He grabbed the thing, and in Tamil Nadu we got the Swatantra party which is grabbed in, and again we got the Janasanghs, Jats. All these parties came together and formed the SVD government, Swatantra Vidyut Deva government, and this SVD government took over the entire thing and formed replacement of the Congress in 1967. That is the reason why the 1967 elections are very crucial and very important. All the local leaders started to influence the political scenario. Now, the other regions also have to start to think of the issues now. There are many issues which are not even yet solved. The development was not to the maximum extent as par of its excellence it was expected to be. The green revolution was done to a certain extent, but it could not reach to its success as per the requirements of the scenario. In Punjab, there was a demand for a unification capital of Chandigarh, which was the capital of Chandigarh and Haryana together. There was a rising movement that asking for Chandigarh capital only for Punjab and removing the Haryana status for that one, or the Himachal Pradesh status for that one. So in this way, the another issue was growing up. And in the region of Sheikh Abdullah in Jammu and Kashmir region, who was under the house arrest, was released from house arrest. He started to asking for the Jammu and Kashmir special status. And in the Nagaland, the young leader who was in jail was also released. So he also started to question the authorities of this one. So there were many issues, many questions to be solved. In 1969, in Assam, a new state called Meghalaya was created. So there are many issues to be addressed, and we don't have a strong leader at that point of time. So who is going to solve these all issues? Who is going to take over the most crucial position now? Congress lost the elections. That was a terrific topic for the Indians, because for the first time in the history of Indian elections, Congress has lost after it got independence. So now, moving on to the scenario, in 1960, the scene was that Jammu and Kashmir, when it was incepted into the Indian Union, that is in 1948, Hari Singh was the leader, and we have the Hindu leader, but Abdullah was also a member of the Union, and he was a Muslim leader. So when Kashmir was separate and was its a princely state, that he was getting out from the Hindus or the Muslims coming and attacking from the Pakistan in the border regions. So he started to ask help for the Indian government. So Indian Home Ministry made it very clear that unless and until the agreement was signed that Kashmir is going to get incepted into the Indian land or the Indian Union, we can't provide any military support from the Indian base. So in order to get this approved, Mr. Sheikh Abdullah flied over to Delhi and made the agreements between this and made sure that Kashmir would have a special status at any point of time. Their development would be par with other individuals also, and special recognition will be given to them. And the Article 370 will be made especially for the Kashmir people. After concluding all these things, they signed an agreement, and Indian Army was sent there to deploy it and to stop the intrusions or intriguers of the Pakistani people entering into our land. So in this way, Kashmir got added into this. So Kashmir issue is a very serious issue, and Kashmir people have a special status of Article 370. Even today, it is a burning topic in the Indian politics of Article 370. Now, moving on to the leadership point of view, or coming back to our point of lesson, like who is going to take over the challenge after 1967? The challenge of Congress party was taken, as well as for the development of the nation, was taken by Indira Gandhi. Indira Gandhi took over the leadership of Congress party in 1967. What happened next? Did she able to meet the success of the issue, or Congress won the elections later, or failed again? What happened next? We shall discuss now. Now moving on to the topic of Bangladesh war. The Bangladesh war also had a key impact on the Indian politics. How did Bangladesh war influence the key on the issue of Indian politics? See, actually the Bangladesh was not at all in existence at that point of time. It is the period when we were discussing is that 1970s. Bangladesh was created in December 1971. So what is the issue here now? See, India is having war with Bangladesh. Now Bangladesh is a region, now it's known as Bangladesh. Actually it is known as East Pakistan, and in East Pakistan we got the elections of Mujibur Rahman getting elected, and he is having a slight link, or he likes Indian setup. So the Pakistan government got suspected towards him and they arrested him and kept him in imprisonment. So in order to get him revealed outside, and the war was in progress, India and Pakistan were also in fighting situation. So the Bangladesh people or the East Pakistan people asked help for the Indians. What happened next? Who helped them? The issue is that Indira Gandhi came into power. Indira Gandhi came into power in 1971. She won with a massive majority of voting. Her slogan was Garibi Hatao. Garibi Hatao literally means remove poverty. Now, after this slogan in 1971, she became the unquestioned leader. She got the thumping majority of votes, and she started to take over the party responsibilities as well as the nation's responsibilities. She came up with a stunning victory, and initially she supported the war, and she asked Mujibur Rahman to be declared as the leader of the nation. And in 1971, when India and Pakistan were in the war, she attacked the Pakistan region and she defeated them, and finally she made Pakistan to agree for the separation of the state and liberation of the Bangladeshi leader Mujibur Rahman, and declared him as a leader of the Bangladesh region, and made it very clear that Bangladesh is recognized by the Indian nation, and a new independent nation was formed in 1972. So with this, the Pakistan was completely defeated and they were surrendered, and they were asked to sign a peace treaty accepting the creation of the new state of Bangladesh from their own land. So now no further we have East Pakistan or the West Pakistan. We now have only west part of Pakistan known as Pakistan region. The eastern part of Pakistan now no more it's a Pakistan, it is Bangladesh region. So now let us see what happened. What are the other steps taken by Indira Gandhi, whether she met her success or not. Now moving on to the Indira Gandhi's actual context of ruling and administration. As soon as she got the majority of the votes and she was in the power of her excellence with the slogan of Garibi Hatao, she started to bring many changes in the legislation process. She started to amend the constitution at various points of time. And when she started to amend the constitution, and in her political goals and all the issues, whatever she is maintaining, whatever her promises are to be fulfilled, she made a promises which cannot be reached by her at any point of time. And she is having very limited powers in the constitution what she can do. So she started to change them and amend them. Then Supreme Court in 1973, against the case of the Kesav Chandra Bharati case, clearly mentioned that the basic structure of the constitution cannot be amended at any point of time, even though you have the complete majority in the parliament. The Supreme Court statement became a nod for the central government, that is the Indira Gandhi's government, that she can't change the constitution as if then and when she wants. She has to change only on certain aspects. The main key aspects cannot be changed at any point of time. And one more issue what raised or brought back Indira Gandhi down to the situation is that in 1973, in the same year, there was a conflict between the Arab and Israeli group. In the Arab and the Israeli group, when they were in the war between each other, because of the war, the oil supplies were blocked. The oil prices went on to be hiked. When the oil prices are at hike, automatically the reserve petrol prices will be hiked in our nation, which resulted in the cost production of every item to be reached to the double of its cost. So when the situations went out of her control and the promises what she made of Garibi Hatao became a problematic for her, she could not control the oil prices because of the international issue which is happening in the world of Arab and Israel. Now what is the solution that she is going to get out of this? Because it is clearly proven from 1973 that she can't control the oil prices If oil prices are not controlled, the petrol prices cannot be controlled. If petrol is not controlled at any point of time, the day-to-day activities of the common man is going to get affected with this. So what would be the other scenario? The scenario became completely clear. She has literally failed to stop the oil prices hikes, and that resulted in the petrol prices hikes, and all the other prices and the commodities prices have been hiked. So what would be the situation of this? We'll discuss this. So when the Arab-Israeli conflict was raised in 1973 and the oil prices went on to its hike, and people started to recognize that Indira Gandhi could not meet the requirements. So we got a leader emerging out of this called Mr. JP. The full form of JP is Jayaprakash Narayan. This Jayaprakash Narayan was initiated to tap the movement in all the regions that the dissatisfaction against the Congress was to be created, and he was in Gujarat, his main role was in Bihar, and in all the North Indian states they started to consider him like he is going to be the alternative for the government and he is going to question the other issues. So in the elections of the next elections in 1977, the Congress lost its elections clearly because of Indira Gandhi could not able to control any of the steps, and finally JP becomes the Prime Minister of India with the Janata Party as a power. Now moving on to this, what happened next for us after Jayaprakash Narayan has taken over the position? Did Congress immediately went for elections or any other breakups were added for this? Because Congress, Indira Gandhi is very clear that there is dissatisfaction in the people. So what is the next step taken by Indira Gandhi? The very crucial and the dangerous step, wherever India had ever seen such kind of step, or for 20 months India was in the darkness or in the black rule. What is that one? Even Americans got scared of it. What did she do in that period? What made her to feel like this? Let us discuss about it. There was not even a dream that India would be entering into a period of emergency. What happened that Indira Gandhi has to go for the period of emergency? Let us discuss the key points. There are two main points which made Indira Gandhi to go towards democratic imbalance or move towards the emergency setup. What is the 2 points that made them to go towards the emergency point is that first point is that in 1971 or the People's Representative Act of 1971, the Allahabad court gave a judgment that Indira Gandhi is no more a member of Lok Sabha because she made some mistakes or she could not fulfill some criteria which are mentioned in the People's Representative Act of 1971. So the Allahabad court gave a judgment mentioning clearly, which means that Indira Gandhi is no more a member of parliament, which means she is not eligible to be in the post of the Prime Minister. This is the clear strategy of the Allahabad court, which is the judgment's clear picture is this. So which means that Indira Gandhi cannot be sitting on the chair of Prime Minister. The second point is that she immediately moved on to the Supreme Court and got stay on the particular issue. Later, the other important issue what is going on the other side of the coin is that Jayaprakash Narayan issue was going on very seriously, going against it, because Indira Gandhi promised that the prices will be cut down and she is going to meet the requirements of all the people and all people will be satisfied in all contexts. That is the concept of Garibi Hatao. So everybody is going to be fit and fine and wealthy according to her promises which were made in 1971. But she could not fulfill them. So Jayaprakash Narayan started to tour the entire nation, and growing dissatisfaction against Indira Gandhi is going to be accommodated by Jayaprakash Narayan. So keeping in these 2 points in view, she immediately moved on after a few days towards the emergency point and she declared emergency. In emergency, it's a cover to do whatever the government want to do. It's like the basic fundamental rights are cancelled. There were no fundamental rights for any individual and all the fundamental rights were cancelled, and immediately there were many steps taken, and the reason put forth to put emergency in India is to save democracy, in order to restore democracy, because there is a political disturbance in the nation, and in order to restore democracy, in order to curb the movement of Jayaprakash Narayan growing dissatisfaction against the Indira Gandhi, so she came up with a view of emergency, curbing the political movements. No political leaders can do any campaigning, no group gathering at any point of time, and finally she started to implement them with a harsh, and police and military were in action, and she implemented them very strictly. At the same time, she did some good things also. The oil prices, the prices hike were put down, and she also brought them into control. There were forced sterilizations, bonded labor was banned, and there are some good points, but the forced bonded labor was banned, and we got the family sterilizations to be forcibly done for the control of population. In this way, they went on doing all the things, but without having the civic sense of the people. The prices were reduced, they got control of the people, there is no gathering of the people, there was no bonded labor, there was no zamindari system, there were no taxes. In this way, there are some positive points, but finally when it comes to the civic responsibilities, when there are no fundamental rights, it was violated completely. Indira Gandhi banned completely the fundamental rights, which was not acceptable to any of the people at that point of time. And she brought serious amendment in the constitution, that is 42nd constitutional amendment, making it power of excellence that the state governments, the central governments will have more enormous powers, and she will ensure that no court will have any dispute settlements of the election issues. One is the central government and state governments will get enormous powers. No government or no state or the high courts or the supreme courts will have any say in the election disputes. And moving on to the third point, the judiciary was reduced completely lower than the parliament. Actually, it is reduced down, and parliament is made supreme, and the decisions of the parliament will be subsiding on the decisions of the Supreme Court. In this way, she brought the historical 42nd amendment, which was a very curbing on the authorities of the Supreme Court in particular. Now, from these points, we can get into clarity that the India has ever seen such kind of situation, like where the fundamental rights are being not granted or nulled, and the fundamental rights were made it to be clear that nobody is going to ask about it, and military action was in progress. No leaders are allowed to roam outside, or all the opposition leaders are arrested, and there was a saying that the number of jails were required was increased, and number of prisoners were filled in all the jails, and the prisoners are none other than all the politicians, especially the famous politicians who are right now alive, were once upon a time in jail during the period of emergency period. And it is also very clear that the 42nd amendment is not an adding fabric for democracy, but it is actually diluting the fabric of democracy, because the Supreme Court is given independent judiciary to check any laws and issues which are against the interest of the people, and here the 42nd amendment is curbing them and bringing down to the authority of the parliament, and parliament is made supreme here, the power of excellence. This is completely the personalization of the government in the Indira Gandhi's point of view, as it was expressed by the opposition leaders of that point of time. So, emergency movement is really a very crucial moment. In this 30 years of span from 1947 to 1977, India has seen a single party dominance, a multi-party system, the single party losing its elections, again regaining its elections, again the single party, an individual taking over the entire control of the nation and keeping a historical emergency against it, and we have seen the various fates and shades of the issue. Let us see in the next 30 years what happened for India in the next part of the lesson.